actually wasn't the mayor when I was doing the Lauryn Hill album. I was a little kid at Warren Street School teaching kids, but I still do poetry now and again, brother. So I appreciate that, and thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that as well. I was glad to be down here at Rowan. Want to first thank President Usman. I know he's not here today, but I want to thank him anyway for allowing me the opportunity to be here this evening. Obviously want to thank Dr. Dworkin and all the members of RIPAC that are here with us and for facilitating my presence and ensuring that I was taken care of here today, driving an hour and a half down here. I'm truly humbled and honored to be here this evening. And if the speech is too long, blame Dr. Dworkin. He told me to spend all this time up here. I was glad to be here, especially during Black History Month. It's important to me. It's a time when I get to talk about myself, my folks, about being Black unapologetically. Many don't like us to talk about race. They call it identity politics, but people that have a problem with people talking about our affirmation or affirming their identity are people that never had their identity in question. I'm a father, a husband, a brother, the mayor of the City of Newark, the largest city in the state, but undoubtedly a Black man. I can't separate myself, my experiences in the world, in this state, from that. The good thing is that rising tides lifts all boats, and the problems I face are the problems we face. The intractable issues in Newark are in fact the issues of this state. God is good because he made former Mayor Ken Gibson's words true that wherever the country goes, Newark will get there first. But in my mind, it sounds like this: if Newark can't get there, the state can't get there either. Our growth depends on those we left on the margins of society. My name, my history, who I am, what we are wrestling with in my city makes this evening that much more interesting, makes this election that much more interesting. I was born 2 years after the Newark Rebellion on the eve of the election of the first Black mayor of a major city along the eastern seaboard. I experienced the unrest in my city through the images of death and destruction in Life magazine, the stories my mother and father shared with us, and the many rallies and forums centered on remembering what happened to us in Newark in the summer of '67. My oldest brother was born that year. He was just a baby when the police rushed in our home and my mother had to hide upstairs with him in her arms. It was terrible times for people in Newark, something we have not really reconciled or experienced closure on. We're still recovering from the physical devastation that caused our city, and the emotional and psychological remnants remain. There was no Marshall Plan for us or any other city in America where this happened, just us left to repair and make sense out of all of that took place there. No Marshall Plan for us. And over 50 years later, we're still on that journey, and what we have learned along the way is instructive for all of us. The belief that good will prevail, the hope that our tomorrows will look better than today, the faith, as King said, that when we take a step forward, the stairs will be there, even if we don't see them. This is what gets me out of the bed each day to try again to deal with problems that I face daily that I did not create, that have been there for decades. I first ran for office when I was 24 years old, as was stated, with $10,000 I raised through cultural events, fish fries, and poetry readings. We were a bunch of college kids, like some of you in here, recent graduates, school teachers, and community activists. Our first headquarters was on Halsey Street. My brother OB used to sleep in it to make sure people didn't vandalize it at night. My younger brother, Amitty, came home from college soon after and left his rap career to get involved in his brother's campaign. And it took us 16 years before we actually won anything outright on our own. Our campaign began in a strip mall in Georgia King Village, powered by sheer will. We had young elementary age children on our campaign like LaMonica MacGyver, who is now the Central Ward councilman and the council president. We used photocopy machines, flyers, and handbills that we passed out door to door. Walked the entire city and sang on the back of flatbed trucks with live bands. It took me 16 years, a point I like to say over and over again, especially to young folks who think this comes easy and fast. My father was not an elected official. He nor my mother ever worked in City Hall. We were not rich, at least not financially. I come from a family of artists and activists with big ideas and even bigger hearts that turned their home into a community sanctuary. I'm not part of a huge law firm or a major corporation. I'm not a war hero, at least not in that sense. I'm just a kid from Newark whose parents taught him to love himself in a world that heaped hate upon him, who taught me to take care of my community and the people in it, not to be cynical, that change will come by your hands, or don't keep my mouth closed because everyone around me has chosen to do so. They taught me to fight even when the odds were against me, and a stumble just means to move forward faster. So I'm here, as unlikely as it may be. This journey brought me here. Lost a sister to domestic violence in his place, and a younger brother that lives with a bullet lodged in the side of his head. The work that I do means something to me. I'm not a careerist. I'm not here just for political expediency. I'm not a careerist. I do this because I feel it, and my ambitions have always been large enough to include other people. So in Newark, we stand for increasing our voting rights. Same-day voting, and in our city recently given 16 and 17-year-olds the right to vote in school board elections. We're trying to address the state's grossly unequal wealth gap by putting people into homes, turning Section 8 vouchers into mortgages, and have created a guaranteed income pilot to give people people who need it access to cash to improve their lives. We created the right to counsel to protect residents against illegal and arbitrary evictions. We sent more than 40 students to college for free with GPAs of 1.9 to 2.5 that were themselves or their parents involved in or was a victim of violence. We have reimagined policing and stood up the state's only CCRB, Civilian Complaint Review Board, and working on subpoena power. We've redirected funding to create an Office of Violence Prevention before the state did and the federal government, and they followed us soon after. And we experienced the lowest homicide we've seen not in 50 years, but in 60 years. We decreased our arrests and have experienced lower crime. We stand with those trying to desegregate our schools and call for reparations. We created municipal IDs for the undocumented before the state allowed a driver's license. We passed laws for workers' rights to unionize and not be fired arbitrarily. We raised our minimum wage for city workers to $15 before the state reached it and are moving to go beyond that to meet the rising cost of housing. We created an inclusionary zoning ordinance that makes developers set aside 20% of development to be affordable housing. The state soon followed. We are the only city with a land bank that allows us to get property to community nonprofits and residents at low cost. We sold properties for $1 and helped residents secure affordable mortgages and tax rates. And yes, despite what you are hearing on the news, we still are the only city in America to have successfully changed tens and thousands of lead service lines with no cost to the residents in record time. And we did all of this by balancing our budget. And in fact, before I was elected, we had a $93 million deficit and laid off 163 police officers. And now we have billions of dollars worth of development happening. We've upgraded our bond rating on Moody's and have challenged the old narrative of our city. We've never run from our problems, never shied away or pretended they were not there. We went head on, and we're not always successful or perfect, but we never gave up. We stayed at it, and every time we run into something, we come out swinging. New Jersey, it's one of the last northern states to rid itself of slavery, a long way from there, but certainly not far enough. To me, New Jersey has been on a very painfully moderate walk down the right path. We have grown comfortable with this place because we watch the extremism mounting in the country and observe other states either at a standstill or moving in the opposite direction. We say at least we are not them. This makes us feel good about our uneven progress and about our slight bigotry, if there's such a thing, and our inability to get the momentum we really need and build an economy and a society where everyone feels included that we all benefit from. A strong and fair New Jersey whose policies and imagination is large enough to actually include all of us. The formerly incarcerated looking for housing and a driver's license to get a job. An immigrant learning the language, trying to join a union and increase his wages. Students trying to find a place to live they can afford while drowning with student loans and a job that will keep them from being crushed. Single mothers looking for affordable childcare and opportunity to further her education and work at the same time. A homeowner whose taxes keep increasing and services diminishing, looking for a decent school system to send his children, even if it's outside of his zip code. Or grandparents that are paying more rent than they can afford and miss their medicine because they have to choose. We talk about people in categories here of rich and wealthy or middle class, but this is not what New Jersey is. We are working families trying to make sense out of all the politics and press, out of the loud talking and foolishness, saving the little we can as we watch all we work for disappear into the high cost of living in this country and in this state. Struggling to make New Jersey work for us while we watch the connected argue politically about what we need to do to keep the richest families in our state. And if you look like me, a black man, or you speak a different language, or a woman, God forbid, a woman of color, those problems get exacerbated twofold. The United Way does what they call the Alice Report. That's asset limited, income restrained, but employed. These are people that earn above the federal poverty line but cannot afford to live in New Jersey and are struggling. These numbers are staggering. Those numbers plus those that below the federal poverty line in New Jersey adds up to about 37% of the families of all New Jerseyans. And it differs by county. In Cumberland County, 56% of the people in Cumberland County are struggling. In Essex County, that number is 45%. By race, 31% of white families in New Jersey are struggling. That's a third. And 52% and 51% for blacks and Hispanics, respectively. That's almost the entire state that are struggling here. There are large numbers of people in all categories, and our steps forward have been good ones, but they have only gotten us to the front door of democracy and not gotten us inside. It's time to go indoors, and whatever we decide, we cannot afford to go backwards. We must make a clear decision in policy and practice that we are not and never will go backwards, that our motion will always be forward, forward ever, backwards never, is what we say in Newark. Frederick Douglass, in 1857, when the Supreme Court passed Dred Scott versus Sanford, if you don't know that case, you should probably talk to your law or history professors, which identified us as property. They asked him about that. He gave a speech and he said, oppression as organized as ours is will appear invincible all the way up to the moment it falls. In a time of grave despair, it's a hopeful statement, one that says we will win, that don't look at giants as unbeatable simply because we only have a rock and a slingshot. What needs to be done oftentimes is big, heavy, and will ultimately take many of us to get it down the road. And because politics gets in the way of progress, we become content with gradualism. We have much more to do for those regular working families that sometimes we incorrectly categorize as middle class in New Jersey, the working poor and those that are on the margins. This is not just the right thing to do, it's actually the only thing left to do. There are a lot of us that we have to begin to get to participate in our economy by being more inclusive and challenging our thinking and policies that stop short of allowing us to benefit from the growing diversity of this state. We have to modernize and reform our tax laws that allow the wealthiest families to contribute less. We have serious problems in our state, from food insecurity to transportation. They cannot be addressed at the current state of affairs. And while we find ways to give the rich tax breaks, we need to make the tax code fair and to find out how to give credits to New Jersey families raising kids in our state. Keep the corporate business tax, remove loopholes that allow them to shift profits to other states to avoid paying their fair share. Look at states' millionaires tax and make sure it's progressive. The estate tax and the mansion tax need to be brought back and reformed respectively, which allow us to build more affordable housing and deal with health care and transportation. We can't stop saying that there's a shortage of workers and begin to invest more in those that have been locked out of labor for too long. Women, undocumented, formerly incarcerated, Black and brown and South Asian communities that have been looked over and left out. We give people access to training and certification, education, and the opportunity to work. And this problem goes away overnight. We can pay people decent wages and our economy won't sink, despite all the pundits. We can create more pathways to get unfettered and unregulated cash into people's households, and they will not waste it, as proven in Newark with guaranteed income. We have to invest in our railway stations. Look at what happened in Harrison and how impactful that investment was in expediting and attracting development. And transportation makes these public make these public works projects and get people closer to jobs. And as we are doing here, incentivize change in zoning ordinances that allow for density around retail, workforce, and affordable housing for our sons and daughters coming home from college, or for our teachers and public service employees, or for those that are disabled and our seniors. We have to create more opportunities for collaboration, get out of this myopic thinking fueled by home rule and segregation, and create regional economies where cities depend on each other and counties can't sit back on the sidelines and watch, where opportunities in housing cross borders. Everyone benefits from eradicating homelessness, not just Newark. From reducing crime, not just Newark. For building more housing, not just Newark. For making more homeowners and taxpayers, not just Newark. Improving people's skills and giving them access and destroying inequity benefits everyone, so everyone can participate in the economy, not just Newark. This is what we are attempting. The state is obsessed with spending money so people don't leave New Jersey. and less concerned about developing opportunity for those that are tied here, rooted here, whose children are growing up here now, who when they finish school, we want them to choose New Jersey because they can find a great opportunity and career here. They can find a great neighborhood that's affordable and don't have to occupy their old bedroom in their parents' home for too long. We want them to start their business here and incubate their new ideas here and expand opportunity for all of us right here in New Jersey. We want to incentivize them to choose us, choose New Jersey, and not go anywhere else. Not just for the wealthy to choose New Jersey, but all of us. We have to help families with increased in-cash assistance and expanding eligibility. Workforce New Jersey is not getting the results we need to. Many are left out, particularly people Black and brown. Create baby bonds or expand earned income tax credit. Add to the federal child tax credit with a state tax credit and make it easier to access these benefits. Make healthcare more accessible and affordable to all. Work to fully fund public education and desegregate our schools. It should not be a crime for people to find a decent school outside of their zip code. Reform policing and incarceration in this state. It is uneven, costly, and racist. Close some of these youth facilities and begin investing dollars in community-based intervention. Continue to make police officers accountable and support the creation of a CCRB with subpoena power. Close the state's racial wealth gap with at least talking about reparations and create more homeowners and support Black and brown businesses and small businesses in this state. Help them grow, expand, and start up. Build more housing. Incentivize the changing of local zoning ordinances that prohibits this was exclusionary zoning and make sure it is inclusionary zoning. We need more housing, period. This is the #1 problem in this state, affordable housing. And I know when people talk about affordable housing, they see me or my mama. But affordable housing is something that everybody in New Jersey is grappling with. It is probably the #1 issue that creates the cost of living to go up in families, and that is housing. If I was born in a suburban community, a rich suburban community, and I'm not going to say any names, I was born there, and I grew up there, and I went to the great schools there, and I graduated from the great schools there, went to college, and got a great education, and got a job. I cannot afford to live in the neighborhood that I was raised in because it's too expensive. I cannot buy a house in the neighborhood where I was born in because it's too expensive. I can't rent in the neighborhood where I was born in because the zoning ordinances don't allow it. So I have to move to places like Newark and East Orange and work in New York and afford a high-rise apartment in the city of Newark. And so the market is created for high-rise apartments in the city of Newark, which displaces people in the city of Newark who cannot afford the rents that are being raised for a market because you refuse to build affordable housing in your neighborhood. We don't solve this, we don't move forward. We don't solve this, New Jersey does not move forward. A diversity of housing, affordable in different median income brackets and low income. Do not allow cities and counties to get away with not involving themselves in developing housing. They can't skirt their responsibility. They have to build it. And yes, we can incentivize it, but we must also demand it. Look, New Jersey is a great place to live. We have some of the best services, but everyone is not paying for them equally. We have some of the best services in New Jersey, but all of us are not paying their fair share, which overburdens populations of our state, overburdens so-called middle class or working families in New Jersey, overburdens poor and working families in New Jersey to pay for these services. And while we have some of the best schools in New Jersey, all of our kids don't attend those schools. Some of our kids are actually segregated by race and class. More than half of Black children go to schools that are at least 90% Black. Decades after Brown versus Board of Education. And we have more superintendents in New Jersey than we actually have mayors. Which means we're actually paying extra for segregation. We have great towns and cities and pride ourselves on our liberalism, but we are deeply segregated, and families' life expectancy varies drastically from zip code to zip code. In Essex County from Livingston, Newark just 8 miles away, there's a 14-year difference in life expectancy between those two cities. There's a lot of wealth in our state, but the wealth gap here is shameful and untenable. We have an opportunity in New Jersey to try something innovative. Creative strategies that tackle intractable issues that are deep and long. We just got to all do it together. And at the center of those problems are the solutions to sustaining growth, creating opportunity, that the answers lie in our ability to be inclusive. That we're not talking about inclusivity because it benefits me. We talk about inclusivity because it benefits us. We're not talking about equality and equity because it benefits me. We're talking about equality and equity because it benefits us. I was on a call with a reporter today who asked me, said, you talk a lot about city issues. What about suburban communities? New Jersey is made up of suburban communities. And I really took that question to mean you're a black guy, how are you gonna get white guys to vote for you? But it's all good, it's fair, it's a fair and right question if everybody is asked the question. But the reality is the issues that I'm talking about are not city issues. These are state issues. Housing is an issue in the state of New Jersey. Affordability is an issue in the state of New Jersey. Access to food is a problem in Cumberland County, is a problem in Warren County, is a problem in Essex County, is a problem in Union County. We're not talking about problems that are germane to black people. We're talking about problems that are problematic for all of us in the state of New Jersey, and we all have a responsibility to address them together. And we have to trust and have faith in the best of us and not be held down by decades of stereotypes and racism. We can't be held down. The great thing is that young people want to live in Newark. They want to live and eat at different restaurants and dance to Afro beats and hang out. They don't have the same hang-ups that folks had 15, 20, 30 years ago, which makes the prospect of change that much more incredible now than it's ever been. We cannot allow fear to paralyze us or turn us into cowards that betray our own children's dreams to preserve our individual comfort. We have a chance to not just let the door of opportunity close, but actually walk inside of it. We have a chance to take a chance on something new, and not the same old ideas from the same old people, from the same old places, and think we're gonna get different results. Fruit Loops and Apple Jacks may look different, but they taste the same. And no matter how uncomfortable things get, how crazy they become, we have to make a choice not to go backwards. We have to make a choice not to turn around and go the other way. That we have to stay on a steady march forward. No matter all of the people yelling on the side, all the distractions, we have to stay forward. No matter all of the folks that benefit from our division, that created those questions so we can question what we have in common. We have to stay forward. Despite all of the folks that are in charge of this state, that sit in the back room and make a decision, the 4 or 5 white guys that make a decision about who's the governor, who's the United States senator, who's this and who's that. It's time for them to address the people of this state. And it's time for the residents around the state of New Jersey, especially our seniors, to go to the polls, not with a letter and a number, A1 and A2 and A3, that they actually know your face, that they know your last name, that they could talk about you at the breakfast table and the dinner table, that they know what you believe and don't believe, that they when they go to the booth to press a button or pull a lever, they're not just pulling A1, but they pulling Ras Baraka. That's what we need them to hear. Whether they like it or not, they should know my name. Whether they want to vote for me or not, they should know why. And not because somebody fed them some dinners and gave them A1, A2, A3 and sent them in a poll and say, pull the levers. And then they're complaining that they can't afford their rent because the pharmaceutical drug industry is taking all of their money and there's nobody representing them in the state house that makes sure they're doing something about that. And why should you expect them to? You don't even know their name. You don't even know what they believe, and they don't have the decency to come knock on your door and talk to you. And this is what we want to change here. And I will sit down, but I was asked, why am I doing this? I think the time is now and it's just right to do it right now. That we've been giving our votes to other people over and over again that I believe sometimes are less qualified, less experienced. In Newark, we're in a storm every day. I fly in a storm. I'm not afraid of turbulence because I've been in turbulence before. I know when you get on a plane, you don't want to have the pilot tell you, this is my first flight. You might make your way out the door. because you know turbulence is coming, not when it's coming, but it is coming. But because we've been in turbulence, we've been on this plane before. And we've been through these storms before. And the storms we've been through are storms you're experiencing all over the state. The storm of inequity, the storm of poverty, the storm of high prices, the storm of not being able to afford housing, the storm of trying to find a decent education to get money for your kid to go to college so they're not in debt, the storm of making a living here in the state of New Jersey and not moving somewhere else because we just can't afford this place anymore. We know these storms and we deal with them every day. From transportation to lead in your water, we deal with these storms and we deal with the press that come because the storms are present. And I look forward to the storms because, as a matter of fact, I don't feel like I'm doing my job until the storm shows up. So I was born for these storms and I was born for this time. And so as this race goes on, New Jersey is never, ever going to be the same. No matter what happens in the end, you mark my words, the state will never be the same because Ras Baraka announced that he's running for governor in the state of New Jersey.
Okay, wow. All right, that was, thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause to the Mayor. Mayor, we had a bunch of folks who registered online, and they often submitted questions they wanted to ask. A couple of them were all in the same areas, and you've touched on a bunch of them. So I'm going to try to adapt them a little bit to address the kinds of things you said. Because you went through any number of different policies where you thought we could do better. You know, and a lot of the kinds of issues that you addressed, some would say the current administration of Governor Murphy agrees with you, is trying to do a lot of those same things. Could you elaborate a little bit? What are the biggest areas where a Baraka administration would be different from a Murphy administration?
Well, first, I just want to say that I think Governor Murphy has done a good job. Let me just start there. I think that he has marched us down the right path, and I kind of addressed that earlier. And, probably further than many governors before him. I just think that we're still on this moderate walk. We're still on a moderate, kind of slow-paced walk, and we have not gone as far as we can go, which goes to my analogy, getting us to the door of the democracy, but not getting in, right? And I think that we need to go further on many of these things. For example, we talk about the idea of the wealth gap in New Jersey, but we have not really taken steps to really deal with reparations or address that. We talk about segregation in schools, but have not had a plan to really deal with that. We're fighting the issues around housing in states and cities now are coming up with plans, ideas around how to create affordable housing, but there is no real state plan about housing and affordability in the state of New Jersey. We need that. I think they mean well and they're going in the right direction. I just think we need to go further and that there are people on the sidelines who are preventing that, but we need to push through.
One of the questions came in about your economic priorities. Like, what's your top thing? And you referenced it, if I understood you correctly, that affordable housing is the number one issue in this state.
Yes. Can
you give us what do you think is actually, lots of people recognize we have an affordable housing problem. The question is what exactly to do. Can you give us what your ideas are? What do we need to do in order to address the affordable housing issue?
First, we need to build more housing. That's number one.
Yeah, but how does that happen? What I'm trying to get at, do you believe there should be new incentives or tax breaks for developers, that we have to mandate certain kinds of things? How would you address
I do think we have to mandate a few things, but I also think that we need to rethink how all of these tax credits are organized and begin to look at smaller and mid-sized developers who are building diversity of housing that don't get caught up, that don't get picked up in the big buckets that all of these developers get unless you're a big, giant corporate developer, right? They're mid-sized developers that are developing housing that's with affordable mortgage programs, first-time buyer programs. They're folks that are developing moderate and affordable housing across the state of New Jersey. Those are the programs that should be incentivized, prioritized, more than me building a 400-unit tower that, maybe we get 20 people in, that's affordable. I'm not saying go away from that, completely, but I'm saying that we have to prioritize mid-sized and small developers who are out here getting the work done in these communities. And so clearly, the whole supply and demand, the fundamentals of capitalism, I mean, the demand is high, the supply is low, so the costs are high. I mean, that's just clear. So the fact that we have no supply drives these markets up. So it means we need more housing. If I grew up in Millburn, I need a house next to this house, and we need to be able to build and create density and create zoning laws that allow that.
You touched on the tax credits and tax incentives that we have in the state. One of the things that could have transformed Newark a few years back was when Amazon was looking to build an East Coast headquarters. And the state's plan at that time was to offer the first or second largest corporation in the world, $5 billion worth of tax incentives on the presumption that we were going to get $10 billion of new jobs and revenue and things like that.
50,000 jobs, they said, actually.
So, look, there are critics in New Jersey of all of these kinds of corporate incentive plans. And they say we shouldn't be giving $1 million or even $1 billion tax incentives to $1 million or $1 billion companies. Nonetheless, that incentive strategy remains something that the state is engaged in. So where do you come down on this? Does it make sense at any level to offer these kinds of large incentives for large companies?
I think it does in some aspect that you have to continue to provide opportunity and incentives for people to come and do development, people that are here to do large scale and major development to create thousands of jobs at one time, right? And I think that the outcome should drive that, how many jobs you're creating, how much money is being put in the economy, what can you expect on a return on that investment, because that's what that is. But I don't think that should be the primary go-to for the state of New Jersey. I think that ultimately our primary should be how do we get smaller and mid-sized developers engaged in this process where they can build housing where people need it right where they are. Because most of these people are building housing in downtown communities and very few communities. Everybody can't get those incentives, get those packages. If you're building in Jersey City, if you're building in Atlantic City, if you're building in Newark, if you're building in Camden, but what if you don't live there, right? What if you live in smaller communities in Cumberland County? What if you live in Hillside? What if you live in Union? What if you live in smaller neighborhoods where people are developing real housing that's affordable, creating mortgages that are affordable? We need to incentivize those folks to continue those programs, give them the tax credits to continue to work. Plus, I think some of these tax credits that we give out to corporations should go to families. So I think we need to be thinking about how to give families tax credits, how to make sure a family that's in their home for 40 years gets a benefit for that raised their family in Newark or in anywhere in New Jersey in a very difficult time economically. How do they get a break? How do we give, these working class families a break? And so our thinking should be about that, not about the 20,000 rich people that live in New Jersey, but what about the millions of people that we need to actually stay in New Jersey?
Thank you. I want to shift a little bit because some of the questions came in regarding your career as an educator. As we talked about, and this really has to do with charter schools, and so that's where we're heading here. So you taught and later were served as a principal of a traditional public school, and yet fully 1/3 of Newark's school-age children attend charter schools. In many other communities, I can't speak for Newark, but in other communities, the tensions between charter school parents and traditional school parents can be extreme. So my questions to you. So do charter schools siphon away money from traditional public schools and thereby weakens them as the critics of charter schools would lead you to believe? Or was your view that charter schools help students who are trapped in traditional failing schools?
Well,
Where's your view on this?
First, there is a clear tension, and it's undeniable because of money. And because of lack of resources, people are struggling for those resources. So there's going to be a tension between charter and traditional public schools, and people that benefit from that struggle are going to exacerbate it, right? As much as they possibly can. But resources is the problem. And if we fully funded public schools, we might not be having this discussion. But ultimately, that creates a problem, right? We also have to think about it in such a way that Charter schools are necessary in places like Newark, but why isn't it necessary in other suburban communities? And think about what segregation and race and class has done to educational process in some of these cities. I think as the mayor, my job has been to make sure that everybody gets a quality education no matter where they are, and to insist that there's less bickering and infighting around these kind of this methodology, and create a space that people can live together, work together, disagree, but not be disagreeable. To create a space where our kids are the beneficiaries and not special interests or individuals or politicians, right? How to make our kids beneficiaries between this struggle. And I think there's nothing wrong with struggle, right? How do you know what right is wrong then? As if there's no up, there's no down. There's nothing wrong with struggle and tension. I think we use the obvious and clear distinctions and natural struggle between these two things to create competition and development in our city and in our schools. I think we do that, and we can do that in a way that's fair, that's progressive, that doesn't mean one sucks the other one out. We do this to improve the quality of education in our city. We've been doing it, and we continue to do it.
You touched on one of the other topics that was submitted as a question, a couple of questions related to this. Newark politics, it has been said, is not for the faint-hearted. There are even movies that are literally called Street Fight, talking about Newark City politics. At the same time, every national poll is telling us that people want more civility in public discourse. So from your perspective, just a broad view of how you see America and where we are right now, why is there less civility in politics today than there was before?
There's a lack of trust. And I think there are people that are benefiting. There's two reasons. So there's a lot of young people that we try to organize and get them engaged in politics, and you tell them to vote, but they don't understand what that really means for them. Like, how is that translating into the things that benefit my life? How is that making, my bills go away? Why my student loans continuously to increase? Why can't I find housing? We tell people in Newark that you should vote, that civil rights is why you should vote, but we still live in segregation and poverty and all these things. So people become cynical, and it's difficult to get people engaged in that. And so they get turned off from elections because we've taken a slow, gradual step instead of robust steps that let people know that their vote actually can be translated into something. So, secondly, I just believe there are people who clearly benefit from the kind of discourse, the negative and ugly divisiveness that takes place throughout the state. And I want to tell you that it's unfair to say that just Newark. I think New Jersey is just horrible in terms of politics all over the state. And there are people up and down the state who understand political bosses and what they've done. But it's become difficult for us to get together because people benefit from our division. As long as we are fighting in these little, groups that we choose, it's easier for people to pit us against one another and then, get the votes that they need and say that it's low turnout. They benefit from low turnout. And so we have to do our best to get people to be as together as we can, as united as we can, even if we disagree. We have to struggle and unite around the things we can unite around.
I want to take that and lead into another question, because we got questions from students that talked about, why would I ever want to run for public office given the way you just described what it is to be in statewide, right? I'm not even in Newark, but I'm anywhere else. How do you suggest we inspire young people to not just be involved in politics, but to run for elected office?
Because we need you to. Because you have no other choice. You can't leave politics to politicians. This is hard work. Nothing is easy. Things that's worth is worth fighting for. You have to. The stairs is harder than the elevator any day. But when you get to the top of the stairs, you did something. When you get to the top landing, you're out of breath, your chest is hurting, maybe you pan, you're like, woo, this was some landing I'm on, but you feel like you've accomplished something, right? And so hang in there and keep walking up those steps. Keep walking up those steps. We absolutely positively need you. There is a void of leadership in all aspects of government. And we need you to choose New Jersey and choose to fight here in our state. We need you.
Many of us have watched with frustration at the apparent inability of Congress to address widespread concerns about our nation's immigration system. Migrant workers are now being bused to non-border states like New Jersey, often unknowingly and without their consent. This state, and certainly Newark, as you have stated several times, is a sanctuary state, a sanctuary city, and that therefore we've been brought to a new level of discussion about and policy discussion about how to handle this. So given this new dynamic, how is Newark coping with migrants? And do you continue to believe that Newark should be a sanctuary city under these circumstances?
I mean, that's like asking me, should America continue to be a democracy? I mean, at the end of the day, we say we take your huddled masses, that we did this for a reason, that people ran from all over the world to find the streets that were paved with gold. Some of us actually paved those streets, but at the end of the day, it's like asking, should we continue to believe and have the values that the country was supposed to be founded on, right? It's hard to want to be democratic. It's hard to want to be fair, to want to be just, to include other people. This is difficult work. It's easy to be exclusionary, to be hateful, to be racist. That's easy. It's hard to welcome people into your house, right? To help them get on their feet, which is what has been the history of this country, good or bad, whether people were pushed or pulled or forced to do these things. And so Newark is dealing with it because we get the residual. We're not getting buses, but people who don't want to be in New York are getting locked out. They come to Newark, so our food lines are getting longer. Our shelters are getting filled. And so, yeah, we need help. We need help from the county. We need help from the state. We need help from the federal government. And the reality is the country has failed to come up with a comprehensive strategy and policy that deals with immigration. We failed to do that. And people talk rhetoric like it's important, but they don't create policy like it's important. It's sound bites that get on TV to appeal to your base to be as raucous and foolish as you can, but it's more difficult to sit in a room and hammer out a proposal, a deal to deal with, immigration or real immigration policy in this country. That is what actually needs to happen, and you need real leaders to do that. And we just have a starvation of those leaders. That's why these young people got to get involved.
I want to just jump back to follow up. How is Newark coping? How are you doing? Are you having busloads of folks like we're hearing in other cities come and?
We're not having. No. But people are coming because of New York. Like I said, they find their way on the path, on the train, and they come to Newark. So our food lines are getting longer. So we have nonprofits that come to the city asking us for more donations so they can buy more food. Right? Our shelters are becoming filled. So we have to figure out how to get people services who are not qualified for services that we provide. Like they're not qualified for federal services. The things that we have, we can't give them, right? And so we have to be as creative as we can with the help of county and state officials to dig deep in this. And I think that it would behoove New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, all of these states to get together, these governors, to get together and figure out a regional solution to all these buses coming into this area. And how do we handle this? And how do we approach the Democrats or the Republicans, the White House and the Congress, about what our plan is on this regional side and present it to them? Say, this is what we need to do. These are the resources we need, or else we're going to be drowning. I feel sorry for Mayor Adams in New York City. He's a friend of mine, and they're struggling over there. And sometimes, they are talked about in a difficult way, but he's trying to do the best he can with what he has, and he's going to make mistakes along the way, but he obviously needs help.
I want to shift completely here because one of the things that Rowan University has been involved with, and this region is currently involved with, is offshore wind. Murphy administration continues to push forward with encouraging new offshore wind industry in the state. Unfortunately, what was once a bipartisan issue has become this bitter dividing line between one side and the other. So, Mr. Mayor, what's your perspective on this industry and its future in New Jersey?
I think it's necessary. I think it's absolutely necessary for us to get into alternative energies. And the terrible thing about government is that we don't have an R&D. So we're not a corporate giant where we have people to research and develop and make mistakes. If you make a mistake in government, you lose your job, right? You have actual money. Yeah. Sometimes listen, when people calling for you to lose your job, you have money set aside to experiment, is what I'm saying. And so all of these things that are happening, this is new energy, new places, new waves. I don't think that we abandon the direction that we're going because we had one hiccup, right? I think that we figure out what went wrong and try to do better at that, right? And it's too much competition. And that's why I always talk about regionalism, because it's just too much competition between cities. It's too much competition between states. It's unhealthy. It's not productive. People who, if a corporation comes to Newark, they're not just hiring Newark residents. They're hiring the people around Newark, Irvington, East Orange, Orange, Hillside. Everybody benefits. So it should be a regional plan, not just a City of Newark strategy. And the same with offshore wind and all these other things. We don't just benefit from that. There are many states. If New York does it, Newark does it, New Jersey does it, whoever does it, we all benefit. So at the end of the day, we need to be talking to one another about how to lower the costs and make sure we get these things over the finish line.
Newark has significant public transportation, befitting a city of its size. In this part of southern New Jersey, we have very few public transportation options. And one idea has been to create a light rail line between Glassboro, where we are tonight, and the city of Camden, where it can connect with other lines. Do you have any thoughts on about this proposal, and more generally, how to improve mass transit in the southern New Jersey region?
Well, I just want to say that first, I want us to not think that places like Newark are fully equipped with transportation, because that's just not true, right? There are whole communities in our city. For example, if I lived in the South Ward in the Weequahic section, if the highway wasn't there, I could walk to the airport. It'd take me 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Because there's a highway, it actually takes me over an hour to get to the jobs at the airport. So transportation is not as robust as we think it should be. I don't think transportation is being funded properly in the state of New Jersey, which is why I talked about earlier finding money to put in transportation. We can't even fund New Jersey Transit. We can't even fund all of the things that are necessary to get busing and trains the way it is now. I think, first of all, the leadership needs to be changed. I think the way we think about transportation needs to be changed, and it really should be about how to get people to jobs, how to get people to the economy, how to get people to commercial areas and districts, how to get people to schools. That's exactly what we should be thinking about, whether it's public-private partnerships or creating smaller forms of transportation, or innovative and creative things that I think we could do with the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill, bring money in and dollars in to do the project you just thought of that'll create thousands of jobs and get people closer to employment at the same time. I think all of those things need to be thought out, and we really need to have a group of people, a task force put together to rethink transportation in New Jersey, period, because there are a lot of people being left out of that. And this is not South Jersey. You go all the way up to the northern part of the state. You go up to Warren County, Sussex County, it's the same problem. I have communities there who have no businesses in their city at all where they have to work. They have to go outside of the city to work because there's no development, but there's also no transportation that takes them there. So they're struggling with that, right? And so we have to figure that out. If we want our economy to get better, we have to figure that out.
Mr. Mayor, why are you a Democrat?
I guess I'm a Democrat because my mama was a Democrat. And her mama was a Democrat. And they became Democrats, after FDR and the New Deal. And they began to fight for issues that were meaningful to us, that they began to fight against segregation and housing discrimination, that they talked about social justice and the rights for everyone, that they talked about having a democracy that was big enough for everybody to fit in, that people in the South in their house had a picture of John F. Kennedy, Jesus Christ, and Martin Luther King on their wall, probably in that order. But those in our mind, in my tradition, and my family, became important. My father, who is as left as they could come, was also a card-carrying member of the Democratic Party. Right? So at the end of the day, the Democrats to us represent salvation in some the people that are going to fight for all people, right? That are going to make sure we have housing, that we have health care, that we're not discriminating against people because of their race, their language, who they love, how they pray, right? That this is the party that we should be in, that we should belong to. But the minute they stray away from that, and we moved out of the Republican Party, because the Republican Party was that once. And we began to move away from that because the Republicans began to focus more on just the economy and wanted to get rid of identity politics. Get rid of identity politics because their identity wasn't in question, right? And so we began to move away from that and got into a party that blanketed everybody. And that's why I'm a Democrat to this day. I don't know if the Democrats are, friends of mine, but I'm certainly a Democrat in New Jersey.
Thanks, sir. Generally, there have been two approaches to reducing the cost of higher education in New Jersey. Clearly, this is a topic that affects people here. One approach has been to increase aid to colleges and universities.
Make schools free.
Well, that's really the question. So the other is to give money directly, as you were talking about, incentivize people to give more money directly to students, as opposed to the institution. So it's easy enough to say we should do both, yes. But do you have an approach? Do you have a thought on how we can reduce the cost of higher education?
I think first, it's important to finish what Governor Murphy started, which is begin to make sure at least community colleges are accessible and are affordable or free for residents of these communities. It's important to finish that. That's another walk that we walked that we didn't finish. We need to finish that walk. We need to make sure that we fight for folks to get their student loans and their debt canceled, right? We need to be for that. No matter, I never heard of this idea because they didn't cancel mine, they shouldn't cancel yours. That's ridiculous to me. I don't know who thought of that, It's like my ancestors telling me because I was a slave, you should be one, right? Does that make sense? So at the end of the day, we should be fighting to get rid of student debt, that's for sure, and give money to universities, to supplement money to universities so that they can reduce the costs. I think that's real, that we do that at state universities, especially first, to begin to reduce the costs, give the money with the purpose of reducing costs at these universities, to make it more accessible for students, particularly students who can't afford to get into these universities.
The recent indictment of one of our two United States senators.
I knew he was going to do that to you.
Yeah. Look, many people, many Democrats, and certainly the Republicans, have called for him to resign even before his trial. Can you offer your perspective on Bob Menendez and his situation?
Well, I think that it's just a grave situation for Democrats. It's terrible for us, especially at this time period in Trump world. I think it's very, very difficult for us. I think obviously what he did, we all know is wrong. Is nobody in here, we're not debating whether it was right or wrong. I think that Senator Menendez was an incredible senator for us in Newark, in New Jersey. I'm being selfish there because he brought a lot of resources to Newark for me and for the people of Newark to work. I think that ultimately it's beneficial for us in this state for him to move on and for us to begin to figure out who's going to be our United States Senator here. And I think, ultimately he understands that and should begin making that process real.
Let me ask a follow-up. How do you respond? I mean, because obviously the Menendez indictment is not the first time we've seen a politician indicted in New Jersey. So how do you respond when someone says, someone from out of state, that you're a colleague, another mayor from out of state, when they say, okay, Mayor Baraka, how corrupt is New Jersey politics? What do you respond to that question?
Well, it probably is as corrupt as any other state in the United States. I mean, I don't think New Jersey has cornered the market on corruption, right? So at the end of the day, politics and big business in bed with each other causes corruption. It allows for people to color outside of the lines. And sometimes that coloring gets to be habitual and things happen that shouldn't happen. And it takes a different level of discipline to do the work that we need. That's why it's important to keep as much corporate money and corporate folks away from the democratic process as you possibly can, or you get these things that you have.
We had one more big policy issue that came up, and that was about electric vehicles. The state has put forward a proposal the Murphy administration put forward a proposal that as of 2035, all new cars sold in New Jersey must be electric vehicles, EVs. So there are any number of prominent people in politics and policy who have said this is an unrealistic goal. Our electrical grid can't handle this usage. It's going to hurt poor people who are going to have to give up cars and buy these expensive things. Do you support this move to EVs by 2035? What's your view on this?
Well, first I want to, these people that are saying that poor people are going to give up their cars to buy expensive cars, poor people don't have cars. Let's start there. Over 50% of the people in the city of Newark don't drive. They don't own a car, right? So that's not even our problem. Our problem is public transportation, right? That's a problem for rich folks that are talking about, how to change their cars. Ultimately, I do believe that we should be going to hybrid or electric vehicles, that should happen. I don't think anything is impossible, by the way. Impossible is words thrown out by people with small minds, right? So I think that it is possible to do whatever we say we're going to do collectively. So if this is our will to make this happen, we can. We can build the infrastructure for it across the state. We can get our electric companies and gas companies to build infrastructure to support the grid to do that. That is not impossible. And in fact, them doing that actually creates jobs as well. So all these things are possibilities. Whether we do it in 2035 or whenever we figure it out, I'm not sure about that. So I can't speak on whether I think that's realistic or not. But I can say that I support the idea that we move away from these gas-guzzling diesel engines that are polluting our air, that are giving our children asthma, that are creating, this kind of global warming that we are so not far ahead of. We have to do something. And if changing our cars to be hybrid or electric vehicles is one of the answers, then we should be engaged in that.
Sir, we've come to the conclusion of our program, and we end, every speaker gets this question as our exit question. Mr. Mayor, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were the age of these students sitting here?
Oh, man, that's a whole nother speech.
You got a long ride. It's all right.
Oh, my God. I thought I knew everything when I was 17, 18 years old. 19, until I knocked on people's door and campaigned and realized I didn't know anything, right? And that I thought people agreed with me because I was smart. And I realized that it took more than you being smart or even right. I wish then that I studied harder, right? That I knew the issues better. That I took seriously the people that I thought I was going to represent, that I actually showed up to the things that they thought were important as opposed to trying to get them to show up to the things that I thought was important. I think it would have made my journey quicker, right? It took me 16 years because I didn't want to be a part of the party and all this other stuff that was going on, which is not a bad thing, right? But it took me that long, but also because I surrounded myself in a vacuum of people where I believed everything we said was right and good, right? And that everybody out there agreed with me. But when I knocked on doors, eventually got to that. When my brother came home and made us go knock on some doors, when we began to really do that, we began to see that we were this far apart from where people wanted and what we thought they wanted, right? And so if we were able to bring those two things together and figure out how to make sense out of what people are missing and what we think they should have, collectively, that we get closer to our goals quicker. Right? And so what that really means is I wish I wasn't an arrogant kid at 17, 18 years old who was running around thinking that was invincible, that knew everything. So if I wasn't that, then maybe I got there quicker. But I tell you this, I probably didn't need to be the mayor at 24 years old. I wasn't ready for that. I probably didn't need to do the things that I wanted to do then. And things happened at the right time for me in the right place. I think everything happens at the right time.